Now that we're ready, we need to verify before we're completely done. So let's go ahead and figure out how we verify this system.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
That's right, when it comes down to troubleshooting, verification is an important part because, Wes, I know that what I've done before is say, all right, it works, and it works for about 20 minutes, and then it doesn't work anymore. So, Wes, let's talk about this idea of verification. Where are we heading with this?
You know, when it comes to verification, it really, a lot of times it's going to be monitoring, and it's going to be a continuous process. I like to say the same thing where I know I fixed it. Why should we have to go back to it? Because we want to ensure that, sometimes where multiple systems can communicate together, we want to make sure that our systems are online and functional. And it's also a good chance to, allow us to determine if we've introduced any other issues as part of our implementation step, the previous step that we've talked about. So as a real quick recap here, we have come up to implement the solution, and now it's verifying that system functionality. Now with system functionality, like I said, one of the big things that we're going to be doing is doing things like monitoring. All right, and remember that, again, this is not a one-size-fits-all, so you could have multiple components that are part of that solution, part of that fix. It could be the fact that maybe we've configured a server, maybe we've brought a server on a line. We want to make sure that we are getting good communication so we can do things like monitoring traffic flows. Remember that we could compare this against the baselines. All right, against the baselines is important because remember that the baselines dictate what acceptable and normal performance is. And after we've had something like an outage, after we've troubleshot something, we think that it's back online, we want to make sure that its functionality is functioning the way it was before we had the issue. So again, traffic patterns, we can monitor those. Device logs are a great way we can dive down into them. Remember that when you implement a solution, maybe you've got an application that is working within this larger ecosystem. You might want to check the application server's logs to make sure that what you expect to be happening is happening. Things like resource utilization that we've talked about as well. Again, remember that your baselines really come in handy when it comes to monitoring, because just the system being online doesn't really dictate that you're getting functionality. Functionality could be directly associated with performance, and those performances, the level of performance is directly related to what the performance was prior to the failure.
All right, so let's kind of give this example here of
Sure.
what can end up happening when we actually do the right monitoring and when we don't do the right monitoring here. So we could implement, let's say, a backup for one of our systems that's out there. And as we implement this idea of the backup, Wes, I can say, all right, Wes, I've run through the utility. It should back up twice a day, every single day. And then I leave it alone. And Wes, a month later, I go back and check on it, and I find out something. It didn't back up at all.
The application said it finished, but whatever we have that on that media, however you're storing it, there's no data there. That's not a good time to test whether you backups have performed well, when you need them. So yes, we want to do something like that beforehand.
So for us, in terms of monitoring then, in that situation, the idea is not just did the backup run, right? It's the idea of what you're talking about. When we run a backup, we may want to go back and check what? The backup.
That's right.
Verify that the backup's actually intact the way that we think it's going to be. Is it in the location we believed it was going to be? Is it all these things? If not, we might find out something that even though we have a backup, it might be corrupted or something else might be happening with it. But whatever it is here, we don't want to wait. We want to actually say, if we've implemented a solution, that we go back and we immediately begin that process of monitoring and somehow. So it is an important part of it. Now, Wes, not only can we use these things that are built into systems, though, one of the other things, of course, is that because the network is really designed to help users, it's also rely on their particular feedback, right?
That's right. And we've kind of touched on this throughout the entire troubleshooting process, that remember that your user feedback is essential. Right? If you want to know, are things functioning the way they should be functioning, well, talk to your end users. Now, outside of the internet is slow, because most people think the internet's slow. But again, talk to the people that are on the front lines, that are using the technologies that you're trying to support. Remember, you might think that it is fixed, but if they're seeing maybe additional issues that you didn't account for, right? This is a good first line in coming or finding out, right? We know that for the statistics, like our baselines are where they need to be, but what is the end user experiencing? Because again, that can uncover the true nature of whether that was a solution that we implemented, or maybe it wasn't so much a solution.
Yeah, this is also key in terms of the workflow of people.
It is.
So if we don't go back and verify, and their workflow has significantly changed, like we've added in 10 steps to whatever they actually were able to do in 1 or 2 steps, well, that can impact the overall functionality. And maybe we implement a solution that was just too complex or too technical, something that we have to be able to streamline or something else, because it is important that it is functional for the user. I can say, I can get to it from my machine. I don't care what you think. Well, that doesn't really help the business at all. So what we want to do is ensure that when we get the feedback, is it actually in line with what they're used to doing or what they need to do? Or is there something else, like, is it harder to do what they need to do? And so that way we might have to go back and say, all right, the fix that I implemented, maybe not exactly a fix. It was more of a workaround. So we need to go back and actually do something else. If we
you know, Ronnie, that's a great point, and it brings to mind something that's happened, in our organization over, our employment here, is that user buy-in is also very important, right? Because if they're using the technology, right, from a let's take IT security standpoint, right? We found something that's not so secure, so we disabled that feature. Or maybe we just disabled the whole product and brought in something new, and according to the eyes of the IT security staff, this is exactly what we should do because we are secure. Remember, security and convenience sometimes do not shake hands with each other, and you might get something that's more secure, but you also might get the functionality, right, is kind of not where it's supposed to be. Remember that your users, user acceptance is very, very important. Change, we all need to adapt to change. It's going to happen. I don't adapt to change well sometimes, but we have to keep that in mind, especially from an end user standpoint. We've heard things, well, that's not the way we used to do it before. This is the way we're doing it now. Well, you got to keep in mind, be easy on that, because user acceptance is also going to be a very important part too.
Yeah, that's why these changes that we talk about go through a plan, and even that plan, that evaluation of what it affects is going to be key. Is it something that's rejected because we didn't consider the end user in mind? The idea of verifying here that when the end user is actually done, they may hate it. But let's say that it is some type of security that we need to go through. Well, it might be worth the inconvenience that they have to learn a new process to get through it, but you have to balance that out to actually figure out, is it actually worth that idea of actually doing that or not? So it might be easier that you don't get a complaint every day about this, or it might actually be worth it and you actually have good justification, like, this is much more secure process, is part of what we need to do, and that's key.
So going back years ago, Ronnie, one of the things that Microsoft found is that when we think about all the customizations that we can do to our desktops today, and you have to remember there was a time where that stuff was brand new. And I'm reminded of a study that Microsoft did when they started releasing the ability to create your own desktop environment for yourself, personalize it, right? That productivity went up. Right, we started getting more, and they, according to the study, started saying, "Hey, people are becoming, more productive because they're familiar in their workspace, in their work environment." Imagine going to a location that you've never seen before. Now, what do? You have to get out maps. You have to talk to people. Right? It's going to slow down your travel. It's going to slow down whatever it is that you're doing. Well, it's really no different than networking when you talk about making drastic changes that users are unaware of.
Yeah. So, Wes, even with these things in mind, once we actually get the changes implemented, there's other things that we need to look out for. What's an example of something else we might need to look out for?
Oh, failure.
Oh, yeah.
And we've kind of hinted at it a little bit. We have to make sure that when we implement a solution and that we're verifying system functionality, we might have fixed one problem, but have we introduced other issues into our network, into our environment? We maybe rebooted a server, and because we rebooted a server, maybe a database isn't connecting. That database is no longer reestablished its connection, but the server that we initially fixed, it's up and running. We're monitoring it. We got baselines. It's performing the way it needs to perform. But the other components maybe that are part of that system are not working appropriately. This happens too when you apply things like updates. We fixed one problem on one component, but now it's it's introduced another problem in another component, or on another component. At this point, if you have implemented a fix, you verified that system functionality, and it has implemented caused other issues, do you need to escalate, right? Remember, escalation is important, right? Do we have to reconsider that backout plan? Again, maybe the failures aren't so evident and we don't find it out except when we get into the monitoring process that we have another issue here and we thought that we were okay. This can happen in things like security, when we have security breaches, right? That's why there's whole entire courses just on how to remediate networks when they have been infected with viruses, because they can cause a lot of other issues, and you might still have those issues present within your networks when you're focusing on just a single issue that you're taking care of. So verifying system functionality is also ensuring that you haven't introduced additional issues as part of this troubleshooting process to find a solution.
Yeah, along with that particular idea, once we actually figure out that something doesn't work, Wes, here's where the issue comes in, is what is our next step? So what would we do if we actually realize that we need to back this thing out? Now we backed out of that, what's the next step?
You know, it is a cyclic process, and that might be exactly what happens. Remember, when we are verifying system functionality, that's part of the verification process, and if we can't provide verification, well, maybe we have to move back a few steps, right? A few steps forward, a few steps back, right? Maybe we have to go back to the drawing board. We have to go back to developing a theory, and we have to test that theory. Remember what Ronnie has stated. We're theoretical here. We're doing this in a lab, not a production environment. We have to do a little bit more testing. Now we have to implement this, what we thought was a solution, and then find out why it broke something else, right? So maybe we have to pull that into testing and figure out and understand that as well too. And then reestablish a plan of action to implement this back into a production environment so it doesn't cause problems in the end. So just remember that it's sometimes 2 steps forward, it could be a couple steps back, and it certainly doesn't help to reevaluate the situation and then move forward as you try to troubleshoot the issue, but also come to that resolution.
All right, Wes. Well, that actually is a great overview of the understanding here of verifying that solutions did take place and also having an action plan once they don't work out and what to do next. So that means that we are ready to proceed on with a little bit more troubleshooting. We got to actually figure out what the next step is going to be, and you'll learn about that in the very next episode.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.